up pops Judas. Interesting character. He's the classic villain that we have in the passion story of Jesus. He's been known as the traitor, the one who sold Jesus to the authorities for 30 pieces of silver. And in English, we even have an expression that exemplifies Judas and betrayal. The Judas kiss, the kiss of Judas. And that's because of how he pointed Jesus out to the authorities. The one I kiss will be he. And the question that comes to mind is, was he really a villain in the story? Or was he maybe fulfilling some kind of appointed mission? I've seen a variety of scholars go either direction on this. I think there's another question that's even more important, is what is he to us? What does Judas mean in our lives? Now, early in Jesus' ministry, he told the disciples what was coming ahead, that he would be handed over to the authorities, that he would be killed only to rise on the third day. Now, the disciples, the motley crew, they needed to hear this more than once, and they still didn't get it. They didn't quite understand. One of the times when Jesus spoke about the coming crucifixion, the mother of James and John came to him. And you can imagine, she loves her sons. She thinks they deserve high positions in his kingdom. Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, please, could my sons have a place at your right side and at your left side when you establish that kingdom? Didn't get it. Jesus' kingdom was not of the earth. It was not to be an earthly government where you could put somebody as prime minister, somebody else as, shall we say, secretary of state, in charge of certain things. They didn't understand. They didn't understand that it was a spiritual kingdom. Now, perhaps Judas had within him that traditional concept of the Messiah. You know, they expected a Mashiach, a Messiah, to come. The traditional expectation was that, well, he would be a military leader, that he would be strong, that he would establish a strong government and kingdom. Perhaps this is what Judas had in mind, that he would be this kind of character, and maybe he could help Jesus take that step. You know, sometimes in our lives we have to push people a bit, don't we? To get them to do what we think they need to do. Perhaps he was doing much the same. At the Last Supper, Jesus gathered his disciples. He wanted to share that Passover meal with them. He wanted to ask them to remember him. Remember, do this in remembrance of me. A wonderful book by Abraham Ribani. Sue introduced me to it through Rocco Errico. Seems Rocco has quoted Ribani many, many times. The book was out of print when Sue told me about it. I think it was about 5 years it took me to come up with the first copy. And after that, I bought several copies. I bought so many copies that I was driving the price up. First one I bought was $5. The last one I bought was $60. I Just kept going on because there's this fool out there buying these books, and they kept raising the price. But I would give them to ministerial students. Rabbani understood the culture of the Middle East. He was raised in that culture. And he said, whenever anyone was going to leave, going to be gone from his community, from his friends, they would have a fraternal feast. They would share one cup, pass it amongst them. They would speak the words, whenever you do this, remember me. The remembrance was important as a part of that feast. Now, Jesus wanted to do that with them. Now, Jesus knew the experiences that were in front of him. And we have scripture that tells us about that feast and those moments in the Last Supper. It's from Matthew 26, verses 20 to 25. When it was evening, he sat at table with the 12 disciples. And as they were eating, he said, truly I say to you, one of you will betray me. And they were very sorrowful and began to say to one another, is it I, Lord? Is it I, Lord? He answered, he who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born. Judas, who betrayed him, said, is it I, Master? He, Jesus, said to him, you have said so. Was it the process of his own ego, his own personality that brought this about? Well, it sounds very human, doesn't it? Sounds very much like us. Maybe I can make this happen. How can I make those people give me that job? What do I need to do to get this person to love me? What can I do to make things turn out the way I want them to go? Judas represents ideas about life. He's got sort of a double name. Remember, Judas and Iscariot. What is he first? Judas, which is Greek that comes from the Hebrew that means Judah, the custodian of life. Life as one of the 12 faculties within us, one of the 12 powers of God. That's divine. And that part represents our spiritual selves, the individuality, Christ in you. That's the custodian of your life. The other name that follows is Judas Iscariot. Iscariot. That means man of the cities, man of convenience. That sure sounds like some aspect within us, doesn't it? Personality. Our ways we have learned to be in the world and to express ourselves in the world. Ideally, personality would be a clear pane of glass through which the light of the individuality shines through into the world. Living that Christ ideal, living by that divine Christ standard. But we don't all do that. We've not all been taught that that is possible for us. So we've learned different ways of coping in the world, of manipulating people and events and things in the world. Personality is very changeable. You can express one thing one day and then decide, well, I'm going to be a different person over here or over there. I can act differently and they'll give me what I want. Judas was a very smart man. The tradition says he was well educated. It also says that he was independently wealthy. which certainly doesn't seem appropriate then for somebody who's independently wealthy to be doing something such as betraying Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. If you're wealthy, that's a paltry sum. Small amount. But even those 30 pieces of silver are symbolic in our story. The 30 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9, right? It's 1 less than perfection. 1. 30 pieces of silver. Well, according to Lamsa and I believe Erico as well, the highest that the average person in those days in the Holy Land could count was 100. What one of you having 100 sheep, losing one, wouldn't go after the sheep because you had 100 sheep, you had a lot. You had the biggest number. If it was 99, it was less. 30 represents a portion, a small portion, 1/3. Functioning on human intellect and human reasoning based upon appearances, the things we've been taught about life that aren't true. So there's that payoff is simply more of the personality that is limited as opposed to the complete individuality. He gets silver, not gold. There are 2 lights in the sky, remember? The sun, the moon. Oh yeah, P.S. God made the stars also. The sun is the light. The moon is not the light. It is only a reflection of the light. It is a lesser light. Isn't that what personality is? It shows the work of the personality as opposed to the gold, the individuality, the true spiritual identity. So he's working from human consciousness, Judas is at this point in time. Jesus recognizes that. But, when you're working with God, as Jesus was doing, God can take every situation and bring good out of it. Yes? Absolutely. For to man there appears to be no good. To God there is always good. I like his statement. It was recorded in John, and it's not in the scripture to go up on the wall, but in John it's 13, verse 27. What you are going to do it quickly. He knew. And he's telling him, go do it. I'm giving you a commission because this is ultimately going to work out for good. He made a little deal with the authorities, and that scripture is, Luke 22, verses 3 to 6. Then Satan entered into Judas, called Iscariot, who was of the number of the 12. He went away and conferred with the chief priests and officers how he might betray him to them. And they were glad and engaged to give him money. So he agreed and sought an opportunity to betray him to them in the absence of the multitude. We all understand that Satan or Satan is the human ego. I want him to make a move. I want him to stand up and declare that he is the Messiah. I want him to establish his kingdom now. Hear it? Me, my way. I know what's best. And Jesus says, what you're going to do, go do it quickly. Get on with it. Sometimes we think we know exactly what the next step is or the next thing that we should do in our lives, or we see some good and we think we know how to bring it into expression into our lives. And instead of praying about it first and allowing that idea to become fully fleshed out in consciousness so we understand and we see how it all works together, we start pushing. We start doing what we think is the right and the best way. Even when things seem tough, we push through it. What I want. It's God's will that I have what I want. Yeah, but not always the way you decide you want it. You're looking through human eyes and human concepts, the human personality. So we try to make things happen. Make things happen instead of letting things happen through us. Jesus handled the human affairs of the 12 and handled those ideas about what he thought life should be. But he sold out for just 30 pieces of silver. It kind of reminds me of a story I heard a number of years ago. There was a man who only had a high school education, yet he had a strong desire to be an educator, to be a teacher. Now, he had a job that paid well. He had a fine home. He had a rather good material life. Yet there was this deep desire within his being to be a teacher. So, as he thought about it, he realized he'd have to leave his job. He'd need to go back to school. He'd need to get a degree in education. And all of that before he could ever teach, before he could possibly fulfill his desire. So he sold out. He did not leave his job. He did not go back to school. He continued to do the work that he had been doing all the time, wishing, gee, I wish I were a teacher. 30 pieces of silver. It's pretty cheap price to sell out for. I think back to when I was on the road playing and making good money, absolutely. And somehow got this desire to go to ministerial school. I don't remember thinking about all the things that had to happen. Quitting my job, selling my home, leaving what family I had left behind, coming here alone, knowing no one, having no job, very little money. Oh, I'm glad I didn't sell out. I'm glad I followed through. Because each step of the process, that Spirit of God was there. I had no job. I had no money. But in the first brief period of time at school, I got a call to come in and play for chapel. I needed a substitute for the early service organist. And then the retreat department started using me for music for the retreats. And everything worked. Just imagine 30 pieces of silver or do what we're doing today. I like where I am. I've enjoyed being here. I hope to enjoy the rest of it. Let's do it some more. Now, this turned out pretty well for Jesus, don't you think? If things hadn't unfolded as they did, would there have been an arrest, a trial, a crucifixion? Jesus had been foretelling this, so Jesus knew this is what had to happen. It had to happen for him to demonstrate the ultimate demonstration. That was a resurrection. Crucifixion wasn't important. That was only a means to the resurrection. He knew that was happening. Turned out well for Jesus and for us. Did not turn out so well for Judas. Judas, as the custodian of life, was life from a concept that was undeveloped, only human life, resorting in human ways to make things happen as a result of the human ego and the personality. That needed to be replaced. What happened? Well, after all these things transpired, remember? He killed himself. If he had only waited 3 days. If he had really looked at this with spiritual awareness, in other words, prayed about it, been open and receptive to higher consciousness moving in and through him, he might have seen a different way. Might. What this reminds us, and the reason Judas is important, is instead of living from a human perception of life, we need to rise to another level. After he died, his character was replaced with one that represents a higher perception of life, a spiritual perception of life. So whenever you have some major decision in front of you, whenever there's something you want and you want to see about making it happen, pray about it and let that guidance make the idea full and firm within you. And ask step by step, show me, Father, what do I need to do? Is there anything I need to do? Pray about it. You let that idea unfold and fill your consciousness. And you then take the steps that you're guided to take instead of deciding from that human perception, oh, I need to do this to make it happen. You let it happen through that divine spirit within you. Imagine if you wait symbolically 3 days. Those 3 days, well, it's a reminder of that trinity of time, space, and form. What I mean by that? Over time, within space, things take form. So, when you pray about something and you get the fullness of an idea, you hold on to that idea over what seems to be a period of time within you and in your life, something begins to grow and express or manifest. 3 days for time, for space, for form. If only Judas had waited 3 days, might have seen an alternative or a better way. If he had waited 3 days, he might have seen, I don't need to die. I need to change my mind. What do you think would have happened had he seen the resurrection? Would he have looked up and said, well, golly, shoot, I didn't know he could do that. He might have said, I believe I believe in that divine Spirit in me. And I choose to live my life from that perspective from here on. Wait, 3 days makes all the difference.